news? Tell us.
Send your tips to cjme.com.
Powered by Audio Warehouse. They have your SaskTel data plan.
The Roy Green Show on Regina's #1 news and information station. News Talk 980 CJME.
2 weeks ago, Toronto Sun columnist and one of the very best in this country, Laurie Goldstein, was a guest on the show. And it had to do with the Occupy Wall Street protest. And more than a few listeners thought Laurie and I were arch enemies and believed that one or the other needed to be defended. That's not the case. Laurie Goldstein joins me on the Roy Green Show on the Chorus Radio Network. So, Laurie, our segment of 2 weeks ago generated a huge amount of reaction. Some thought I was rude to you. Some thought you missed the point that the show was about Occupy Wall Street, the Canadian version, which that weekend was the news story. My replies invariably were that you and I have been friends for 20 years or more, and there's a huge amount of mutual respect. We've covered many issues and topics together, and we largely see the world through a similar, though not an identical, prism.
Oh, exactly. And also, I think when all is said and done, we see this issue, too, largely an identical prism. It just depends on which way you come at it. But let me just join in saying to your listeners that my respect for you is knows no bounds, and I've known you for, as you said, decades. And even when we disagree, I respect you. But I think on this issue we really disagree on.
No, we don't. We really don't. We were just talking about two different things.
Yeah.
And this being radio, I was looking at the clock, Laurie, and it was starting to crowd me.
That's right. And the experience of doing these things, I was going to grab it and run with it as long as I could.
And you did a great job. So we have lots of time now. So let's go back to 2 weeks ago and the points you were making about the Occupy movement and Wall Street. And you've written two really incredible articles, one in today's paper and one earlier this week, about this whole development. And,
yeah.
You've been on the show with me, and I've called what happened on Wall Street corporate gangsterism.
Yeah, that's a good name for it. What all started this was my perspective that there's one thing with the Wall Street Occupy crowd I agree with, and basically it's the ones who are occupying Wall Street rather than everywhere else. And that's that there's no doubt that the 2008 global economic meltdown, which threw millions of innocent people out of work, cost the pensions of millions of people who didn't know what a collateralized debt obligation was and who paid their mortgages, and basically caused economic suffering all over the world and continues to. People who saved all their life as they're supposed to took hits on their mutual funds. Basically, it was caused by a finite number of banks on Wall Street who did some incredibly bad things, and who I would argue basically bribed politicians of both parties. This isn't a question of Democrats or Republicans. Bribed with billions of dollars in political donations and other favors, including sweetheart mortgages for some of them, to get rid of a lot of regulation that the Americans have put in place since the Great Depression, such as the Glass-Steagall Act and limits on derivative trading and limits on leveraging, which is borrowing to invest in the stock market. They got rid of all those things, and then what happened was you had this berserk. This wasn't capitalism. This wasn't free markets. This was crony capitalism. These are banks that basically relied on political favoritism to do the things they did. And what I'm saying in today's column is that, and I know, and by the way, my Thursday column was on President Obama. President Obama has now said to the American people, well, the things these investment banks did, they weren't really illegal, they were just unethical and immoral. Well, I disagree with them. I think they were illegal. And today's column is about how the Securities and Exchange Commission in the United States is settling these cases of what amounts to massive fraud. And what they're doing is that they're reaching financial settlements which sound very impressive against these banks, but they mean nothing to them. They're not going to deter them from doing this stuff again. And the reason is that these banks have paid these kinds of penalties before, and they've done it before. The specific case I cite is a $285 million settlement with Citigroup, which is one of the biggest bank institutions involved in this. That sounds impressive. We're going to fine them $200+ million. Citigroup made $3.8 billion in the third quarter of 2011, and it was bailed out by taxpayers. That's not going to stop. And so what happens is, what's happened there is a judge in New York who has to approve this deal between Citigroup and the SEC is asking them to, no, you guys got to defend this. This is a case where in $1 billion subprime mortgage securities deal in 2007 where Citigroup bet against its own investors, the estimate is that those investors lost hundreds of millions of dollars, and Citigroup made at least $160 million and probably more. And you're getting this no contest thing where the company doesn't have to admit fraud. The SEC lays out its case essentially saying, from our perception, this was fraud. And they pay this fine. None of the directors or the CEO have to pay it. Nobody goes to jail because this is the alternative to criminal prosecution. And the judge in this case is saying, answer me 4 questions. 1, how can a securities fraud of this magnitude be the result simply of negligence? 2, what reason is to believe the proposed penalty will have a meaningful deterrent effect? 3, what was the total loss to the victims as a result of Citigroup's action? And 4, why was the SEC generally unable to identify those responsible for the fraud? And let's not just pick on Citigroup. Let's talk about Goldman Sachs. Last year they paid a $550 million fine for very similar things. J.P. Morgan, $153.6 million. Bank of America, $150 million, which was originally supposed to be $33 million, and then this judge got after them. But the point is, they're simply paying a fine they can easily afford. Nobody has to admit guilt. And if you or I or the Wall Street occupiers or anybody else or your audience, Roy, commits fraud, we go to jail. Why do we go to jail? Or we're put under house arrest in order to make restitution.
Well, you know what? Well, you point out in your column that Wall Street government oversight, I found this to be really such a telling sentence. Wall Street government oversight is conducted by largely former Wall Street execs.
Oh yeah, well, like the head of Paulson, the head of the Secretary of Treasury to both Bush and Obama. And I don't think this is Republicans or Democrats. It's both. He was the former, and I'm not saying he's a bad person, but he was the former chairman of Goldman Sachs. He arranged the bank bailout. And when he was the chairman and CEO of Goldman Sachs, he fought against controlling efforts to limit leveraging and leveraging. And it's why, a lot of these banks, when this thing came in 2008, they were leveraged 30 to 1, 40 to 1. That means that for every $40 of debt they were taking on, they had $1 of assets. One of the main reasons it wasn't as bad in Canada is that our banks are less leveraged.
But you point out that they want to change, there's some call to change the system in Canada to mirror that one that you just described that exists in the United States.
Yeah, the Ontario Securities Commission has proposed these no-contest deals for the United States. Now, I want to be fair. The Canadian banks weren't anywhere near as bad during the 2008 crisis, and that's why we didn't get hit as hard. But people all over the world lost money. I mean, I lost money. I've never taken out a mortgage I couldn't afford. I have no debts. My family lost tens of thousands of dollars because of what these people did. And I just like to see somebody go to jail for it.
Well, you also point out that the banking and fiscal scandal in the 1980s, which was nowhere near what we experienced in 08 and 09, resulted in jail for more than 1,000 banking officials. This time, not even any criminal referrals this time.
Yeah, no, that's the SNL case, and it was also related. Now, some people argue. And you're telling me in this one, nobody goes to jail? Nobody? Like, okay, you did all this, you misled your investors. Now, let's be fair. If a bank gives you, or a financial advisor gives you advice that the stock's going to go up and it goes down, that's not criminal. Even if they give you stupid advice, like a lot of other